Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's bake bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language." So the Lord shattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the earth, of the whole earth. That is interesting. Let's examine the text here. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. Sounds like a universal, sounds like a world culture. And a common linguistic framework. As people moved eastward, they founded a place in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. They then said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Interesting. So what is being talked about is this theme of how they wanted to they were afraid of that they would scatter across the earth if they didn't like unify. But the Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language as they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other." Almost as if people began to bicker and infighting about what they should do and what they shouldn't do, and that people began to greatly disagree with each other. This is interesting. This is really interesting. You can either take this as a person who's either afraid that the people are beginning to be tyrannized, or that either that or a tyrant is afraid that the people are beginning to rise up against him and unify as one people, as we the people, as in we the people of these United States of America. How much of these of stories like the Tower of Babel story are just a retelling of what has always gone on in history? You know, the old saying, "There is nothing new under the sun." What has been shall be, and has always been. It is really interesting how just the stories that we tell are just tellings of what has always happened throughout history. Almost as if these things could be considered warnings. Like, take the story of Atlantis, for instance. People are so obsessed with trying to find real Atlantis that they really don't focus on what the actual story is saying. And many Christians focus on the biblical prophecy without asking what the biblical prophecy and stories are actually saying, what they are actually trying to tell us what had happened before could happen again. And I find it really interesting that these things are talking about that the story is talking about something kind of like Atlantis, and like as if this was some lost, forgotten empire of history that once existed but doesn't exist anymore. For us, probably more so than the people who wrote it. Like, only the people who wrote this story know the actual history of it. We don't. We don't know. We know very little of our own history, and what we do know gets obfuscated by people who have vested interest in pushing narratives, whether that be the mainstream or even the alternative stream. Either Yahweh is an all-knowing, all-powerful, ever-present God who recognizes that a tyrant has probably has risen up, or he is or Yahweh is not a all-powerful, not ever-present, not all-knowing, benevolent mortal, rather than a benevolent God who is afraid of a man, if you will, who's afraid of the people rising up against them. Like a foreign ruler has come into that land and confused the people of that land who are subject to him. Satan, the one who sows discord among the brethren. Interesting how Satan is accused of the same thing that Yahweh is doing right here. Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Now, how many of you know of the concept of as above, so below, as above? Etem Menaruki means temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. Interesting. How many people have ever heard that Stonehenge is aligned with the equinoxes? Humans have been doing this for thousands of years, aligning structures with the astronomical bodies, whether to study these astronomical bodies or even to venerate them. We've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. Look at what Robin's flying. And it's like, what is this, like, what, they had flying machines. They had the idea of a flying machine long before the modern times. And you're basically just like thinking, where could they have gotten this idea from? Where could they have gotten this idea of a flying machine from? It reminds me a lot of aircraft, like the Spitfire. The Spitfire is just one of those aircraft that is just really interesting. And I'm trying to figure out where they could have gotten this idea of a flying machine. It's just wild. Aerial combat. People back then were thinking of aerial combat. And we see the chariot it turns into a spacecraft. A frickin' spacecraft. Like a flippin' spacecraft. Like, they go into outer space, and it's like, this is like very uncanny for someone who has lived. It's very uncanny for a modern person such as ourselves. And we just don't really you have to wonder if there's lost technology from man, this echoes of a lost civilization.
Firing chain is armed. House suppression water system is armed. Go for main engine start. 8, 7, 6, 4, 3, 2, 0, and liftoff for the final launch of Endeavour. Expanding our knowledge, expanding our lives in space.
Houston, Endeavour, all program. Roger, roll, Endeavour.
Houston is now controlling. Endeavour beginning to roll over onto its back. The roll program underway as Endeavour begins the heads down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 136 by 36 statute mile orbit. Three engines now throttling down as Endeavour passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle in the lower atmosphere. Approaching 1 minute into the flight.
Endeavour, go at throttle up. Roger, go at throttle up.
Endeavour's three main engines now back at full throttle, all three engines in good shape. Endeavour's already traveling 1,300 miles per hour at an altitude of 11 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, now 12 miles. At liftoff, Endeavour fully fueled, weighed 4.5 million pounds. It's already lost half that weight in propellant now, burned that weight. Next event is burnout and separation of the twin solid rocket boosters. That upcoming here shortly at the 2 minute 3 second point. Those boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of fuel per second. And standing by for separation of the solid rocket boosters.
They're hiding the true answer to this question from us. How is it that horse and buggy people carved massive temples out of extremely hard volcanic rock? This is the Kailash temple in India, and it is one of the largest rock-cut temples in the world. Mainstream archaeology claims it was constructed in the 8th century by the Rashtrakuta king Krishna I, using basic tools and sheer manpower. But how is that possible when you consider the temple's enormous size and complexity? To carve the Kailash temple, over 200,000 tons of rock had to be removed. Historians say that this was done with chisels and hammers by horse and buggy people. If you do the math, even with a large workforce, it would have taken centuries, not the 18 years often cited. The precision and intricate details in the carvings also suggest the use of advanced tools. Here is where it gets even crazier. The temple is also astronomically precise. It is aligned to channel sunlight into its innermost sanctum on very specific days, and the sunlight lands perfectly on sacred sculptures. This level of precision indicates a deep understanding of astronomy and geometry, but it gets even stranger. Legends and local folklore speak of the temple being constructed in an incredibly short time, possibly even days. One story tells that it was completed overnight, suggesting the use of advanced, perhaps even otherworldly technology.
What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. You know, all these little anachronistic things that you see in like ancient civilizations, such as a lot of the stonework of, like, let's say the Great Pyramid of Giza. Some of the granite stonework is amazing. Like, you have to ask, how did they do all this? How did they carve some of these exquisite carvings that they made? And it's like we are dealing with, like, lost ancient technology and techniques gone from us, just lost to time. You have people who want to gleefully celebrate the destruction of the ancient world at the hands of the Christians, for instance. And these people want darkness. They're no different from the people who gleefully act in the destruction of, like, the United States of America and the dismantling of our values. This is why we need to play a proactive role in the protection of our culture, traditions, and values. Because if we don't, we'll end up like those ancient cultures.
Well, hello there, everybody. Jamming to a little bit of Allman Brothers. Great album, by the way. If you don't have it, you should. Live at the Fillmore East. Kick-ass album. Saw those guys back even when Dwayne there's. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Thank you for stopping in as I get over there and I get over here. And the bus is now leaving. I hope you're on board because I am. And again, thank you for stopping in, tuning in, and turning on. There you go. Speaking favor over us all, nothing missing, nothing broken, as we like to say. Be of service to others. Just be a kind person. Because that's maybe what we should really define us as a species, not humans, persons. There we go. Hello, everybody in the chat room. Hello, Desiree. Good to see you. Shout out from Mount Shasta. How is that? I know exactly where that is. Welcome. Thank you for being a part of this. Mr. Robert Scott and Scotty Boy. Scotty Boy, we are definitely favored to have you amongst us. So much love to you, brother. Elderberry and Emperor Rex, what's up? Chris, good to see you. Hello, Stephanie Marie. DC and Street Mom. Hello, how are you, Brenda? Good to see you. DC, good to see you. And Josh, Mr. Floyd's Universe. I love it. Colleen, and let's see, who else? Grace. Hello. Good to see you. Millie, hello. And Nina the Mystic, hello, darling. Good to see you as well. Let's see, is there anybody else I'm missing? Probably. Rick, how are you? Speaking healing over you, my friend, all the time. It's the only way we're going to do it. I think I got everybody else. So, Gilbert, good to see you. And who else? As I go back here, I'm scrolling back in time, don't mind me. Doug, good to see you as well. And so Blazing River, yep, yeah, our country is a changing. It is, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. And probably what we're going to be talking about today is probably very fitting. We'll get that. One of a great resource I like to bring out, and those of you who have joined recently, I hope you're subscribed. And if you are, thank you. Get a friend to subscribe as well. That's why, and hit the like button. But anyway, there is a great jewel of a website, and there are several. This one is forgottenbooks.com. And if your e-library is needing expansion, as your mind should always be, this is a great, great resource. As you can see, they cover the full gamut, anywhere from what I would say mainstream doctrine, religion, to esoteric philosophy. And again, get it, make use of it. You can just really have a fun time. This is like a candy store, pick over here, pick over there. It's all pretty cool. So get it. All right. You got it. And as you can see, it just goes on and on and on. Great resource. All right. So I'll put that there, and then put that there, and we're here. Yeah, we are. So I like to think deep. The more time I spend on this planet, the more I realize how my own personal prejudices, perspectives, knowledge has been fashioned after a false construct. And as you get older, you just don't sweat the small stuff. It's not the question that you have become apathetic, quite the opposite. You become more empathic, and you question. I do. Question my beliefs all the time. My political beliefs, my material beliefs, my spiritual beliefs, they're all in there. And they've all been crafted and created by your environment. And As you get older, you see that there's typically two types of people. The vast majority are the ones that are just pissed off at the world. Their life is hard and, et cetera, et cetera. And they get mean. And then you have the smaller minority where, again, you learn it's in the modern nomenclature today, everyone, you hear particularly one philosophical ideology saying, well, you have to be tolerant, can't be intolerant. But you realize that those who say such things, they're already intolerant. And this other small group, you just learn that, hey, that's how that person is, or that's how they think. Do I really want to expend the energy to try to dissuade another? Nah, nah. Not time enough for that. And most would agree that so many spend their lives. It's very important, your social circle. If you're in the corporate world, profession, entrepreneur, whatever it is, it's a constant competition for resources. And the thing about it is, it's never that resources are ever not there. It's our perception that there is lack. And then you have to step back and you say, okay, so fine. What's the problem? There are a lot of problems. We all will agree. The world is one messed up place. We have, I think, a new genus of man. These are the ones that have their head perpetually up their ass. I got a t-shirt that actually expresses that. I once told a person, I said, your problem is your head is up your ass all the time. And the other thing you learn, here's one word of wisdom. So again, what is the difference between a brown noser and an ass kisser? We all know them. Probably know some yourself. Simple, it's depth perception. And then you get that other group who said, we just don't have time for this. And you get into thinking and you begin to say, well, all right, so what's the problem? We know, for instance, mankind, womankind, humankind. There is no such thing, doesn't exist. When our technology began to crack the cosmic code, part of that code breaking was when we broke the human genome. And we discovered a whole lot of things about us that we really didn't want to know, because it emphasized how much we have forgotten, but yet bears out blatantly that something's wrong. So we're hybrids. All of us are. There are no humans left on this planet. And we're going to get into this book that is so cool because it begins to define the different type of hybrids that exist in this planet in the 21st century. It's shocking. Most people, and whether they admit to it or not, in the deep alleys of their consciousness, the story of Adam and Eve is firmly planted. Well, when you look at the reality of things, that as hybrids, then what was Adam and Eve? Were they human? I mean, it's interesting. Doesn't it say that they were created in the image of whatever they were? I contend geneticists, but so what were they? Were they Cro-Magna? Were they sapiens? You look at all the different genesis of man. Homo meaning man, sapien means wise. So what it appears is that we're mutts. We're mutts. Heinz 57. There's so much in us that we don't even know what it is. So the construct, such as created in the image of God, or even here in the United States, we have it in our documents, all men are created equal. Maybe not. They didn't have the human genome code broken 300 years ago. They didn't know what they also didn't have 300 years ago? The Sumerian tablets. That puts a crinkle in things. So were the Sumerians sapiens? Was Adam and Eve sapien? Is God sapien? You begin to get into this. And so you get into, well, what then is human? And if we're not human, if we're a hybrid of a human, then who did this to us? It's a serious question, because it affects every aspect of what life is in this reality, in this world. Now, if it was better understood and more widely taught, it might provide some answers why some humans are like they are and others are not. And if it could be possible that we could find our kind, then we could set up enclaves, because we know that those humans are counter to us. And it's not the color of skin. That has nothing to do with anything. But again, it's part of this genetic experiment, if you want to call it such.
I was out going for a stroll by the beach, and it got me thinking about poetry. But being an anthropologist, that often means something ancient. And in this case, the Epic of Gilgamesh came to mind. Thousands of years before Homer, the ancient Aryan nobility living between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers embedded esoteric knowledge and history onto stone tablets in the form of epic poetry, which combined real-life people and events with occult symbology and astrotheology, meaning they intertwined historic facts with symbolism and the movement of the stars. Over 4,000 years old, it's an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia, regarded as the earliest surviving great work of literature and the second oldest religious text in the world, the oldest being an ancient Egyptian funerary text dating from the late Old Kingdom, carved onto the subterranean walls and sarcophagi of pyramids at Saqqara. The Epic of Gilgamesh consists of 12 tablets and starts with 5 Sumerian poems about a powerful king of Uruk, which is in modern-day Iraq, and once was an important Sumerian and Babylonian city, which had between 50,000 and 100,000 residents, making it the largest city-urban area in the world about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. The Babylonian version of the poem was titled, "He Who Saw the Abyss," or another way of translating it, "He Who Sees the Unknown." And the first half discusses King Gilgamesh and another character called Enkidu, which is described as a primitive wild man, which as an anthropologist I take to mean something along the lines of Homo erectus. The gods created this archaic hominid to stop King Gilgamesh from oppressing the people of Uruk. So Enkidu acted as a servant and slave in what was one of the earliest agricultural civilizations, and farming was very labor intensive. At first, this was a slave and master relationship, but Enkidu is then civilized through sex rituals with a prostitute, and for the rest of the epic, Enkidu is then a friend to Gilgamesh, although not an equal. While this sex ritual was always very graphic in nature, a new cuneiform tablet has been discovered recently, and although it's just 16 lines of text, the sex scene is described in even more detail, yielding an entirely new sequence of events. The epic already told of how Enkidu, the primitive hunter-gatherer, became human by having sex with a woman named Shamhat for an entire week straight, making love for 6 days and 7 nights, non-stop. But now it turns out that it took not 1, but 2 full weeks of lovemaking to make Enkidu truly human. Enkidu originally grew up among the animals and is described as a savage or wild man, until Gilgamesh orders the prostitute Shamhat to seduce him and separate him from his animal companions. There are 2 ways that most people interpret this ritual event, which leads to Enkidu becoming civilized. The first is that the context of prostitute in ancient Mesopotamia was not derogatory. It's not the same thing as in modern times, and implies a sacred act where through the ritual one would commune with the gods and goddesses, and if carried out in a specific way, using tantra and prolonged orgasm, it results in an activation of the chakras, including what some call the third eye, and leads to enlightenment. Others see this marathon sex as having to do with literal procreation, where the civilizing of Enkidu is about the creation of a new race, a genetic hybridization. This argument is made with references to other supporting material regarding the Anunnaki, which means princely seed or princely blood, and alludes to a divine, godlike race in Sumerian mythology that creates a servant race, and according to some interpretations, upgrades Homo erectus in order to create a slave species of gold miners and workers. This concept is not isolated to Mesopotamia, as even in the ancient texts of the Indian subcontinent, we have tales of the Vanara, a simian race that lives in the forest, featured in the Hindu epic the Ramayana. The word Vanara comes from Vana, meaning forest, and Nara, meaning man. And although the word Vanara has come to mean monkey over the years, and the Vanaras are depicted as monkeys in popular art, their exact identity is not clear. The Ramayana presents them as human-like, with reference to their speech and clothing, but also describes them as having monkey-like characteristics. This Vanara race also appears in other ancient texts, including the Mahabharata, and while some Hindu scholars think of them as strictly mythical, a substantial number of them take the stories to reflect literal history, pointing to examples such as Rama's Bridge, a 30-mile-long bridge described in the Ramayana as being built by the god Rama with the help of an army of ape men. Geological evidence suggests that what appears to be a man-made bridge was once a former land connection between India and Sri Lanka, and that it was passable on foot until the 15th century when storms deepened the channel. A local Hindu temple claims that Rama's bridge was entirely above sea level until it broke in a cyclone in 1480. While this bridge is controversial, and there are plenty of skeptics discounting the stories as myth, I bring it up just to demonstrate that the idea of a different hominid species being hybridized and used as a worker or slave race is not exclusive to the Sumerians, and there are scholars that not only point to archaeological evidence to support the ancient myths, many are now turning to genetics to back up the ancient literature, since modern DNA sequencing has unlocked the genomes of not only modern humans, but several archaic species, such as Neanderthal, Denisovans, and others that have yet to be identified in the fossil record, which are likely Homo erectus specimen that can be found in the DNA of various races of modern living human populations today. Dr. Rangan Ramakasharan, an Indian scholar, said that, quote, "If one reads the original Ramayana without the influence of succeeding vernacular versions, which emerged at least several centuries later, Vanaras, like Hanuman, are referred to as distinct species altogether. Like other human species, they speak fluently and they inhabit a distinctive culture. Ramayana is perhaps the only literature to speak about a variety of human species, offering to fill an important gap in human ancestry and evolution through literary support. Interestingly, the protagonist, Lord Rama, corresponds to the sapiens, and other Vanaras loosely match Homo erectus. Are these striking similarities mere coincidence, or shouldn't we take it more seriously?"
We should also remember the nature and the role that religious myths and stories play, both today and in times gone by. High literacy rates are a truly modern phenomenon. The ability to read, or let alone write, was once extremely rare, so humans had to rely on oral tales in order to preserve knowledge. We're natural storytellers, and there is something in our nature that also makes us susceptible to being told good stories. There's really nothing quite like it. It's why we all love a good movie or a great book. Religious texts and tales have always leveraged this part of human nature. Be it events or a moral lesson or some sort of teaching, even natural phenomena, they all get personified into stories of gods or into stories of beings and people that we can actually relate to. And the information is conveyed in a context that is entertaining and memorable. And these stories are thus preserved throughout time. They're passed along as oral traditions from one generation to the next. This is more or less how organized religions got their start. The priests of the church were the only ones with this information. They would read and interpret the word of God to the unwashed, uneducated masses. And wielding this sort of authority is a quick way to gain power over people that couldn't read it for themselves. This mechanism of the church being the absolute authority on the word of God was tightly controlled, right up until the invention of the printing press, when things started to get a little bit out of hand. Now, anybody could get access to the written word, and anybody could interpret the word of God for themselves, and anyone could claim to be the person with the magic walkie-talkie that was connected directly to the boss upstairs, and they knew exactly what he meant by all the these and the thous and the thou shalt nots. As a result, we had a splintering into the different factions of Christianity, many of which are still in existence today. I really do like Jordan Peterson's take on all of this, that gods and religions are really nothing more than an allegory for various aspects of what was thought to be ideal human behaviors and traits of the time. Warlike cultures had warlike gods, and rather than gods creating us in their image, it seems much more likely to me that we created them in ours. As cultures and civilizations went to war, so did their gods, eventually amalgamating into new deities, representing new ideals for humanity. In many cases, this amalgamation preserved the essence of the lesson or of the story or of the character as it moved from one religion and culture into the next. Many of you will know that this is still the case today, as many of the characters and stories in our Abrahamic religions are directly lifted from the older religions and gods that they replaced. I suspect both as a mechanism to allow people to migrate easily into a new faith and to preserve some of the fundamental records of events or of moral lessons that those specific stories entailed. I think this is why we see such a consistent set of themes and stories that are spread across almost every religion, both ancient and modern, that talk about cataclysm. They talk about the world being remade. They talk about our ancestors barely surviving this and having to then repopulate the world. I think that in many cases, these stories are preserving what are essentially eyewitness accounts of the unimaginable cataclysm that actually occurred, and that these stories have been passed down through many civilizations, through many religions, and they almost always attribute this destruction as the wrath of gods and as having been sent to punish mankind. I'd imagine that if you were around and you saw anything like what they describe in the book of Revelation, you'd think that God was fairly pissed off also. How else do you rationalize such a cataclysmic series of events as anything other than God's fiery wrath? Nobody likes to think that it's just chance that we're here, that our entire existence is continually and precariously balanced against the randomness of the cosmic shooting gallery that we happen to live in. This understanding of the scale of the universe is only one of the many gifts that modern science gives us. But it can also lead to a sense of nihilism that comes from realizing just how insignificant we are in the scale and scope of the universe. It can become something of a depressing and existential crisis for many people, and this is a relatively modern conundrum for the human character. It's one of the downsides to thinking too much about the size of the pond that we're all splashing about in. I personally happen to know what this feels like, and for what it's worth, for anybody else that finds themselves stuck in that space of existential dread, pondering infinity, it can be balanced by also observing the whimsy and the wonder of the world around us, understanding the beauty and the privilege of being alive and born into a human body, and the realization that nothing at all really matters but the moment that we're in right now. And that there's absolutely no proof that any of this business is actually serious. Even if reality itself is nothing more than a simulation running on the cosmic computers of the future, all we can do is make the most of the time that we have. Back in the good old days, when these stories of cataclysm and destruction were first penned down on paper, this existential crisis based on the concept of infinity really wasn't an issue. Humans were more or less convinced that the world ended just over the visible horizon, and that the gods and the heavens revolved around them, and that everything had meaning, everything had purpose. If you were in their place during those times, what would you think when you saw the comet fragments come streaking down out of the sky? Consider what we know about the Younger Dryas, about that tumultuous period that happened at the end of the Ice Age, a period that we undoubtedly witnessed as a species, and then consider these passages from chapter 8 of the book of Revelations, and ask yourself, what is it that's really being described here? Quoting loosely from the book of Revelations, chapter 8. I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. The angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels which had 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from heaven. It fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood. So many of the people died from the waters because they had been made bitter. The fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone for not a third part of it, and the night likewise. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. End quote. These descriptions continue in Revelations 9, verses 1 and 2. Quote, The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. End quote. Sounds like a pretty lurid description of cosmic impacts and their aftermath effects to me, all personified and attributed to supernatural beings. Think about it. If you were a few generations removed from this event, you probably wouldn't remember a story about a very cosmically unlucky day where bad stuff happened. But once you wrap the tale up in religion, you personify it, you deify it, you put structure around the event, it becomes something that is much more likely to be remembered and to be retold. The fallout from such an event would have had global consequences, and these consequences would have endured for months on end. The sun would have been blacked out for a long time, earthquakes, fire, and flood would have raged across the planet. There are many other passages that describe what are essentially the secondary effects that would have resulted from gigantic cosmic impacts. This is Revelation chapter 6, verse 12. Quote, "When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, the full moon became like blood." End quote. Up and down the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New, there are many descriptions of events that can easily be interpreted as first-hand accounts of cosmic disasters. Here's Joel chapter 2, verses 31 and 32. "The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." Isaiah chapter 29, verse 6, quote, "Thou shalt be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder and with earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire." End quote. The famous Sodom and Gomorrah story, which comes from the 19th chapter of Genesis, quote, "Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven." End quote. Another example from 2 Peter 3 verses 10 to 13, quote, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, the earth also and the works that are therein shall be burnt up. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness." End quote. Talk about harnessing global tragedies for your own ends, with all the talk of whereth dwelleth righteousness. Righteousness dwelleth where we say it dwelleth, damn it. The principle of never let a good disaster go to waste clearly isn't just a modern political technique, it's just human nature. We've been harnessing these types of events for millennia. There are other religious texts outside of Christianity that also seem to capture the essence of what it might have been like to directly witness such a cataclysm. The Vedic texts, the Sanskrit epics of ancient India, in particular the Mahabharata, are quite literal. Indeed, they even call out the destruction caused by meteor storms specifically. And once again, note with these quotes, the description of what I can only interpret as cosmic impacts has been deified and personified into tales. And in this case, they describe the whole process as a mythological cosmic weapon called the Brahmashisha Astra, something that was capable of killing gods, and it functioned by unleashing a literal swarm of meteors. In Mahabharata, it's explained when this weapon gets invoked, quote, "It blazes up with terrible flames within a huge sphere of fire. Numerous peals of thunder were heard, thousands of meteors fell, and all living creatures became terrified with great dread. The entire sky seemed to be filled with noise and assumed a terrible aspect with flames of fire. The whole earth with her mountains and waters and trees trembled." End quote. Other quotes from the Mahabharata. "Various omens appeared among the gods. Winds blew, meteors fell in thousands. Thunder rolled through a cloudless sky. Drona called Arjuna and said, 'Accept from this irresistible weapon called Brahmastra, but you must promise never to use it against a human foe, for if you did, it might destroy the world.' At last they came to blows, and seizing their maces struck each other. They fell like falling suns." End quote. Some more verses from the Mahabharata. "It was a single projectile, charged with all the power of the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 1,000 suns, rose in all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and the Anhakas." End quote. And this is perhaps my favorite quote from all of these, again from the Mahabharata, quote, "These will all take place at the end of the Yuga, and when men become fierce and destitute of virtue, then does the Yuga come to an end. The course of the winds will be confused and agitated, innumerable meteors will flash through the sky foreboding evil, and then the sun will appear with 6 others of the same kind, and all around will be din and uproar, and everywhere there will be conflagrations, and fires will blaze up on all sides when the end of the Yuga comes." End quote. I find it pretty interesting here that there are described 7 suns in the sky in the Mahabharata, and in Revelations we have 7 angels with trumpets. Perhaps this means there were 7 major impacts during the Younger Dryas, and certainly the latest research points to multiple impacts happening during this period. What about some other religions from across time or from around the world? Well, the Mayan codices state, quote, "At the close of the ages it hath been decreed, the world shall be purged with fire." End quote. From the indigenous traditions of Brazil, quote, "Monan, without beginning or end, author of all that is, seeing the ingratitude of men, and their contempt for him who had made them thus joyous, withdrew from them, and sent upon them Tata, the divine fire, which burned all there was on the surface of the earth." End quote. Also the Nordic traditions, this is the Elder Addons. Quote, "Surt from the south comes with flickering flame. The sun darkens, earth in ocean sinks, fall from heaven the bright stars. Fire breath assails the all-nourishing tree. Towering fire plays against heaven itself." End quote. These analogies to cosmic impacts are just endless. Daniel G. Brinton wrote in the Myths of the New World, which was published in 1868, about the tribes of South America, quote, "By far the greater number represent the last destruction of the world to have been by water. A few, however, attribute it to a general conflagration which swept over the whole earth, consuming every living thing except a few who took refuge in a deep cave." End quote. The more you look into these creation stories, the more a consistent set of events or a consistent set of themes seems to emerge.
You know, on this channel, it's called The Journey, and every second's a journey. So we're going to have a fun one today. But anyway, let me say first, hello to everybody in the chat room. Favored beings, we are favored. And speak favor over us all the time because that's the way it is. Nothing missing, nothing broken. That is, I think, the best definition of perfect peace. Then others say that, well, perfect peace would be expending no energy whatsoever, absorbing no energy. Isn't that technically non-existence? Consciousness in a state that it neither vibrates nor thinks? Wow. I don't know. Don't sound like heaven to me. I mean, maybe we're just children of chaos, and we have to have chaos in order to thrive, in order to, advance. We seem to like chaos because it is all around us. I mean, it's freaking everywhere. Chaos here, chaos there. And then you got, the philosophy that says, well, out of chaos came us, matter. Well, then that directly would then support the validation of the hypothesis that we are of chaos. And wherever we go, chaos is sure to show. Yeah. So anyway, think about it. That's what I always say. Hello, Bonnie. How's everyone in the chat room? Joyce, good to see you as well. Blazing River, what's up? Walking Water, hello. Honored. Stephen Jacobs, how are you? Good to see you. Grandpa Brian. Hopefully get Grandpa Brian on a show here. We'll just have to see, but I think it can be. I say here, I am doing well. How are you doing, good sir? Ginger. Lauren, how are you? Such beautiful energy. That's all I got to say. Lori, good to see you as well. And Jargo and Emperor Rex, how are you, sir? Let's see. Jet, good to see you. And hello, Shirley. What's up? Amazing. Curasotis, is that what that? Hello, how are you? Hope I got that right. The print is small. It's like really small. Nina, good to see you, darling. Linda Espinoza, how are you? Rick, how are you, brother? How's everything in your life? Let us know. Look who's here. Jules, all the way from Australia. Summertime down there and wintertime up here. I know. It's still got freaking snow out there. But hey, it's part of the experience of winter. That's what winter is. Winter is cold. Winter, you think of snow. Well, so we've got it all. But anyway, Sonny, Rick says, Sonny, greetings. Good to see you, Dave. How are you, brother? Good to see you. Gilbert, what's up, bro? How you doing? No, we didn't have an adventure last night, but yeah, and I'm waiting for affirmation, 2 or more. Then we'll get the band together again. Josh, good to see you. Gilbert, hello. All right. I think I got everybody. So happy Monday. Ba-da-bum-bum. So I found this interesting over the weekend while reading, and reading is fun. Reading, I think, enhances the effect and the reality. I read a lot at one time in my life about the so-called afterlife. And I guess that's why I have a passion for it here, and obviously so do you. But I was so sure that I had the answer. And if you didn't agree with me, well, that's, but sucks to be you because I have the answer. And I tried to share you the answer. And so when your time is up, remember, I'll be standing there saying, I tried to share the answer, but you reach it. You see, that kind of fucking psychology that just screws with your head, you know? Because once you swallow some of the Kool-Aid, get ready, boys and girls, because the show is about to begin. And mine did. I was so sure of the process. My purpose for being here, right, was to seek and to find redemption and salvation. That's what the journey of life is. Otherwise, the journey of life, your purpose for being here is a very simple 3-lettered word: die. Your whole entire purpose here is to die. Doesn't matter what you've done, no matter where you are, the whole purpose of you being here is to eventually die so that you can experience death. Now, I don't know if everyone on the other side experiences the thing that we have here on this planet, in maybe this universe, but death seems to be the primary purpose. And that used to scare the shit out of me. Seriously. The thought of that moment when clarity is crystal clear. You're about to step out of this reality, the only thing that you can remember, into either one that you've already known or one that you've yet to experience. And so you get back to that whole thing, well, who has the answer? Who knows? I have this book it's in my reference libraries. It's called The Big Book. The Big Book of NDEs, near-death experience. And yeah, this one, the more I get into it, and what would be the odds that I turn to the chapter titled Religion's Got a Grip Too? Davy Crockett says, when he was alive, I leave this rule for others when I'm dead. Be always sure you're right. Then go ahead. But what is right? Who knows, right? And for me, since that time, I was about to turn 13. It's up at Campanile. I stood up and received my salvation. Got the Jesus thing. But because that was what was really important back then. Chuck up another one for the side. Hey, we got this, so, and then the journey starts. And we all have similar experiences. Your reality has been based upon your experience, which is unique to you. And that is so freaking cool. It is, in a sense, a epoch. Each of us here, forever, how long that may be, is in our reality, yours, is an epoch. And if the purpose for being here is to experience this thing called death, then there obviously has to be a purpose for it, right? I mean, if the hypothesis cannot be validated or proven, then to what end do we go, I don't think anyone knows. But that person says they know. I don't know. Because I was reading, I was getting into this whole thing, found a question in one of the boards I look like, and there is a sector of people, um, an enclave of them, that have some really strange ideas about this God thing, this Jesus thing, the beginning thing. And we have here in our studies, we found out that um, if you go by the narrative, so there was the 6 Day people, the blackhead people. Then there was an event. So that ended an epoch, whatever those first human beings were. They didn't have a soul. We know that. But apparently they didn't need one. I think the script says they were found perfect, lacking in nothing. All right, that's pretty freaking cool. I mean, if you're going to go up for a review, right, that would be what you'd want to see on the summary. But that didn't last too long. Comet hit the Earth, something hit the Earth, burned it up. And then we get this second story. Now, the second ones that are supposed to be in power, right, were not the first ones in the first chapter of the book. So there was a change in management. Either someone abandoned the property, or there was a transaction, or maybe there was a war. I don't know. So that was an epoch. And then we got the whole story of us, and the thing about Eve is this anomaly, because if you read the script, it said that this God who is saying that he animated a golem, didn't do to her what he did to the dude. Boy, you could really go down a hole on that one. As long as it's the a-hole, then you're doing all right. But seriously, hello, Mary Wins. How are you doing? Hello, Chris. Deborah Sloan, how are you, darling? Good to see you. Russell, what's up? So, Dr. Manuel, good to see you. Anyway, I digress. Well, come on, that's funny. But anyway, so in this forum, they said, well, Eve was immortal because in this wild belief was that, well, she didn't have this soul thing. Well, then that brings up all sorts of questions. Then are we just hybrids? Do some get souls, some don't get souls? I don't know. I've been sold about but anyway, and then you had the whole, this period of time And if you follow a narrative in that, this is the year 57, getting near year 58. According to the Hebrew culture, Earth started at somewhere about, I think, 3567. We're going to see that here in a second. And within that period of time, we had the garden story, we had the fall, we had the invasion, then we had the war, and then we had, everyone's attention is on this little tiny country. Now you think about this. How intelligent or how stupid do you have to be to suddenly think that the whole world is revolving around events in a country that's no bigger than the size of Rhode Island? But that's where the whole center of creation is going. If you study that period of time, there were thriving cultures that were in existence, the least of which is the Sumerian. You had the Indo-Asia, then you had the East, but none of that is important. Only what you're reading in the verse. And from there, we base time on. So technically, we are in an epoch. Is it the epoch of Homo sapiens? I don't know. I read a lot, and I read a lot of papers, a lot of theories, a lot of speculations. Very little is actual factual, but nevertheless, it is considered academia. And therefore, in this reality, academia trumps all, even religion, politics. But in each one of those other vortexes of consuming power, politics, religion, the intellect is always supposedly at play. So then you get into this thing, all right, so we don't even know where we came from. We're not even sure how that happened, but we're here now and we're intelligent because we've got technology and we know things. Our science is infallible. And you got us on the other side going, okay, sure. Absolutely, you know everything. Yeah, sure. And we're going on the inside going, okay. Just remember what R. Wayne Steiger said. Ignorance is a self-inflicted disease easily cured by knowledge. And that's what we're trying to do, is cure ignorance here. Ours, mine. I'm not afraid or ashamed to say it. I'm ignorant in a lot of different things. But I'm also pretty sharp in others. So, hey, that's what the journey's all about. It's the experience. And if the purpose truly is to experience death, then that means I must be a god. Because if I'm experiencing something that they have never experienced, who's more superior? The one who says they invented death or the one that actually experienced it? Because the truth is, the gods are afraid of death as well. Wonder why. Then we got the techno spirit now. That's just opening up a whole new. So I got into this thing. Hello, Lilith. How are you? She said, summon book of knowledge from our god of war. Yeah. And our two celestial parents. Yeah. The Thunderbolt project on that. The Alien Sky. I've got the DVDs. It's an excellent series because it talks about a time before this God came into the scene, or the one that is perceived. It was a different world. But yeah, we got technology, so we ain't buying that. Fine, you know. So epochs. Want to get into this. Uransha, how are you doing? Night vision. Lobotomies never went away. They just changed forms. One of them is that it's called the boob tube, the vision. Mm-hmm. Right with you on that one, brother. Hey, Grace, what's up? John Price, good to see you. Hello, Stephanie Marie. So, Bonnie, what's up? All right, so I got a few papers because this is all tied into the dragons. The dragons, even themselves, are not immortal, they're just long lived. So, does that mean then to die is universal? But the whole purpose of this perceived reality is to experience death? Because if you read our past, there seems to be a lot of shit that happened to a lot of people that got totally screwed. I mean, we never think about, the fill-in cast, when you're reading the story, and 180,000 died that night. What? 180,000 men plus their animals died in what is said to have been about a 4-hour period of time. Now, if you've got something, let's just say it actually happened. I don't know. I wasn't there, at least none that I remember. But the story goes, this cat named Gabriel came down, and just his passing, and he's not death. That's the thing we don't, our minds don't stop and think about. So this being, whatever it is, passes through this army of 180,000 foot soldiers, chariots, etc., horsemen, because camels didn't come in till later, but anyway. And within a period of time, and you could almost calculate that on flight. How large of a piece of ground would you need for 180,000 human beings? It'd have to be pretty damn big. So you figure something that has that kind of power as, what does it fly over? Does it pass among them? Whatever it does, it kills them. Murder, I'm saying, murder. And then death comes. And that's why I always, when people talk about Gabriel, I'm going, you see, I studied a different Gabriel. The study I read, and by the way, it comes from the Hebrews. They really know angelics better than most of us because that's where the story kind of came from. Actually, no, it came from Babylonian, but that was Mesopotamian. But let's stay focused on where we're at here right now. So they talk about angels in a whole different light. And the one you never want to see or speak to you is Gabriel. Because it means kiss your ass goodbye because you've got a ticket now out of here. But there's all different types of opinions and perspectives. That's just one. But nevertheless, it still gets us back into where we are in us. So a lot of people have died in the making of the story of us, in our epoch. You could say this may be the techno epoch of man. Are we at our zenith? Are we about to do as the toroidal field shows? Because that's what it seems like it is. It is a toroidal field. But think about this. we're all experiencing the same ride, just in a billion and maybe, who knows, 100 billion different perspectives. Unless you believe in the reincarnation thing, but I digress. So, El Gapo, you're right. The original angel of death would have been Gabriel. I mean, it was Gabriel that went through the curse in Egypt, right? Which brings me, so in my library, in my office, I carry different books. I have different thoughts, but when you read the story from the Egyptians' perspective of when this thing came through, the destroyer, wow. According to the Egyptian priest, this thing was bad. We've read the passage in the bronze books, the Coleman Bible, where it said that kids, when they saw it, their hair immediately turned white. It said that when humans saw whatever this thing was, the destroyer, their bowels loosened. Well, that just means you shit on yourself, pissed on yourself at the same time. Now, for someone to shit their pants and to piss on themselves because of what they saw, that's badass. I don't know what they saw. Hell of a description in the book, but, Sarah, good to see you. With David Hall. Yes, been a long time. Happy New Year. We get to go around that ball of fire again. I know. I have to go back and read these comments on Gabriel because that's a fascinating subject. I mean, my Bible school teaching taught me, and I studied under Lester Summerall, primarily an individual that really had a occult view of that's the spirit realm, but again filtered it through a highly organized dogma. But nevertheless, if any of that, and then the material is plentiful, then that text says that there's this whole other reality going on. Now, that's why I began to study. So, epochs study is like, that's the only thing that really makes it worthwhile, right? And sometimes we just study crap. I mean, that's all it is. But hey, sometimes that's just what you have to do. And in this paper here, and I won't be going through it all, but this guy, um, he brings it forth in a way that is very interesting. And his starting date was the deluge. So this flood event. How accurate is the flood? Did it really happen? Is it just something that has spread across the planet through word of mouth, and every culture after a millennia begins to, accept into their philosophy that there was this flood event? I don't know. The one that I always found odd, to digress, I'm on the bus, that's right. Told you to strap in. Oh, I forgot to. Oh, might want to strap in. That way you don't spill that drink. Yeah. Is completely was sitting here going lost and completely lost the train of thought when you go on to that. Well, getting back to the story, was in, and I'm thinking of it right now. Joshua, the book of Joshua. And then it's the story of where the sun stopped and did not progress for, I think it's in a day, allowed the children of Israel, the 12 tribes, to have an advantage, because battle back then, well, there was nothing sterile about it. It was bloody, hand-to-hand combat. And if you think about how these attacks and these incursions of conflict, when they would fight each other, typically 3-4 hours, because everybody is spent. Your energy is like, man. And if you retreat to come back and fight another day, there's going to be bodies everywhere. It mess. But anyway, if you knew that you were going to have a complete day where the sun did not go down or arise, and you planned for it that way, you kick your enemy's ass anyway. So his paper says, was dating of the deluge attainable? The abstract is, historians consider the biblical account of the deluge as a myth. However, this famous event occurred at the earliest times of recorded history. His reference here is the Sumerian king list. Today, scientists believe in the last ice age, called the Pliocene, ending in 10,000 BCE, but there is no witnesses prehistory of this planetary cataclysmic event, and its existence is based solely on the controversial interpretation of its consequence and their dating. I mean, if who was the one who started the calendar in the Jewish side? I mean, you got a problem. Without the admittance that the Sumerian empire culture was not first and trumped anything that the Hebrews could have come up with, because the very patriarch of the religion came from Sumer. And that got a little different story, but if you're creating a religion, you've got to tweak a little thing here and there. Yeah. It says the existence of erratic blocks and disappearances of mammoths are presented as evidence of the last glaciation, but contrary to what one might think, sea dating provides conflicting results. Moreover, the sudden extinction of mammals, some who were found with food undigested in their stomachs and still unchewed in their teeth, would be spread over thousands of years. Likewise, during the last glaciation, the sea level would have decreased by at least 140 meters. So if I'm going to do my math on that, what are we looking at? I don't know, 450 something feet, which is currently explained by melting glaciers, but such variations of the sea level did not occur during previous classifications. And it is interesting. I mean, these mammoths, which I still believe are still in existence, there is evidence in that in Siberia, but anyway, I digress. So what happened? They just suddenly froze. I mean, was this flood? Was this worldwide event? Important stuff, man, because this is how we say it's the year 2025. We know that is preposterous. We don't know what year it is. But, it sounds good, so let's keep it. He goes on to write, dating obtained by calibrated sea is considered absolute by most experts, but confrontation with the Egyptian chronology, which some dates are fixed by astronomy, reverses this belief. This comparison shows that dates obtained by sea, calibrated by I believe that is the Denraka chronology, match to those from the astronomy until minus 2200 BC, I think. But before this date, increases exponentially. And it does. The biblical and Sumerian accounts of the deluge are very similar. So who borrowed from who? We know who did. So what did the Sumerians actually experience? That's a question. Was it a pole reversal? Was it a pole flip? What happened? Something happened. Uh, let's see. Which they say occurred in the year 600 of Noah, or the what is it, Zudara, and supposed a dating around 3170 BCE, according to the Septuagint. The period 3170 to 2800 is very poorly documented. The only remarkable event is the construction of the Tower of Babel, then its abandonment and the emergence of languages. In the past, we have discussed this here, and I can tell you from my learning, when you stop and think about what happened here, you become, well, it becomes addictive, because stop and think about this. Let's say that there were, I don't know, 500,000 people out here in the plains, right? And even that area is now desert, so there was climate change always in effect. But nevertheless, let's go back to this thing of them building a tower to reach the gods. And then something happened. Was this a ray? Was there flying saucers, other ships that suddenly came down? And what? Did a mass lobotomy on the people that were there? How was it determined that there would be different languages? Whose library did that come from? How was that decision made? Because if we were a single people with a single tongue, imagine where we would be today. And who has the right to do this to a species? You interfered yet again in the affairs of man. How many times, if you read the narrative where I came from as a former Christian, and in that theology, can you say that this God just fucked things up? And every time it got involved, it made it worse. I mean, take the story now. So we're figuring that this is, I don't know, let's say it's 2900 BCE. Well, so for all those thousands of years, we had one tongue. Now, one language. Now, just call me suspicious, not Shirley, but one language, would I not have been more telepathic than using vocal cords with expression? There are books that say that these people literally had a third eye. They were different than us. And the whole thing with the Tower of Babel, taking it from the Epic of Gilgamesh and the story of Noah, which was, brought into the book, the Bible book. Then what happened here? I mean, in an instant is what it says. All this changed. Was this kind of the Avengers thing with, Thanos? Was this that, balancing the universe, you eliminate 50% of the living people, right? But the technology to do this, it's extraordinary. I mean, you could make science fiction up on this for a decade and never get to the end of it. What happened here? And the thing about it is that they're saying that if it apparently was a collective effect. I don't know if you necessarily had to be on that plains for that thing to have happened. It seems to have been globally implemented. This is a big deal because we're talking about epochs, right? So if this Tower of Babel thing happened, then what really happened? I mean, if this is God doing this, I don't know about you, but that's a type of, that's type of energy I don't want to be around. Just talking for a friend. Let's go on. According to Mesopotamian literature, the ziggurat of Babylon, called the Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth in Sumerian, was dedicated to Marduk. Many scholars estimate that these mythological texts have no historical value, but several Sumerian and Babylonian inscriptions have confirmed the antiquity of this ancient ziggurat and the name of its builders. Sumerian stories confirm the biblical version about 4 key points. 1, a universal deluge. And you have to just think, how did this thing happen? I know what the description in the book says, but you have to look at it from a practical point. All right, so you're going to inundate the earth. So it said that the water spewed from the fountains of the deep. Now, that would imply that there are oceans that exist below the mantle in such abundance that it would inundate the top surface. Okay. 2, only one language at the origin. This, I don't know about you, but I don't find many people that stop and talk about this because you can't just gloss this over and go, wow, sucked to be them. No, it sucked to be us. A single language. Today, we would have an IQ of 10,000. We today would probably no longer really need our bodies. We may have already ascended and transcended into a different form of being. A single language. And then this construction of the Tower of Babel, you get the depictions of brick and what have you. These were smart people. Then engineering to support that weight. And I have read that the base of the Tower of Babel was something like, 20 miles. Big. And so what were they thinking? We don't have the records for that. What we have is this trivial little story that says that we thought that we were greater than the gods. And look what happened. They smacked us back down. Well, there goes free will right out the freaking window. It's only one language. 3, the construction of the Tower of Babel. Again, the engineering on that alone. We don't have the technology today to do that. And 4, a sudden and simultaneously onset of languages like Sumerian, Akkadian, Egyptian, etc. Now, I've read this thing. This is my 3rd time reading this particular section again. No one stops and thinks about this. Think about the control that you would need over a species to implement this. So you have these languages. Plug and play. We'll take this off the shelf. Yeah, I think I need the one with the pretty pictures. It's what? Hieroglyphics. Yeah. That's the one I want. And what? Did they just jack us into the great machine? The great computer? The great AI? And all of a sudden now, we fucking know how to speak Sumerian, but I have no freaking idea what you're speaking. What kind of crap are you writing? You know, that's what it come down to. And every one of these languages are eloquent languages. The Sumerians were the first one to put to, print, so to speak, in clay tablets, a decipherable language. If this happened, I mean, this is beyond science fiction. Rod Sterling, my ass. I mean, we got the outer limits on top of that. Then we got the story about, Adam, 930 years, or Methuselah. And, the reason why no one makes 1,000 is that then you would be considered to be a god. So the biblical and Sumerian accounts of, let me bring this down here. Human longevity seems to have remained constant over the entire period from 3100 BCE up to now, which contradicts the biblical data concerning the relatives of Abraham who would have lived prior to 1600 BCE, much more than 130 years. However, contrary to the popular common sense suggests, human limits are difficult to set by science. Studies on human longevity provide amazing data in accordance with the Bible. Thus, for unexplained reasons, the maximum age at death, longevity, is not constant but increases regularly, and since 1960, there is an unexplained acceleration of the increase. So what the hell happened in 1960? A lot. But it's saying that we're living longer. Well, not everybody, but you get the idea. And that's what makes this topic so freaking interesting, because if you start really looking at the dots themselves, examining the dot, what does it represent? It is a point in time. It's an epoch in time. So who's doing this? This also, by default, is saying that there is some sort of control that we may have an idea about, we may have a sense about, but we really got no idea what it's about. And you and I, thank you for hitting the like button, but you and I, Lauren, you and I mean, Gilbert, we're all on this journey together. And it's so freaking weird when you think about it, because we could be experiencing the same thing, but we're really perceiving something completely different. And yet, you and I seem to be under the control of something that's had control of us from day one, it appears. They don't want us to get smart. They don't want us to get too spiritual. Anyway, I could go on, and this is really a good paper that was written on this, because it begins to examine the minutia of this, and it don't add up. And what I mean, what it doesn't add up, it's like it's saying that as long as we stay coloring within the lines, we're okay. You start coloring outside the lines, and they're going to slap us back down. And it appears that they've done this before. And it appears that they will do it again. So, I guess I went back and looked at this 8 years ago. I went through the Zephyr Yazira, and we went in detailed of the Sephira and the Sephiroth. But I wanted to bring this out because this is what has manifested itself into our current reality. No matter how you look at it, it's like it's the type of dye that, the computer ink dye, if you get that on you, it's going to have to wear off, right? So I just thought we would go through this because, again, I think of these other beings, the dragons. They'd have to have an understanding of this, as apparently either a predetermined or pre-programmed algorithm is running. So when I was, born again, spirit filled, tongue talking, saved by the blood of Jesus individual, I knew of God. My perception of God was more Old Testament than it was a New Testament. The Old Testament God that scares the crap out of you. I mean, you become so freaking paranoid that it's like you're walking on eggshells, and you're just hoping like crap you don't piss him off, right? Because he curses things. And apparently when he freaking curses things, things get messed up. But when I started reading these books, and as you started joining me on this, I don't know about you, but from my perspective, I went, I knew it. I knew they weren't telling us everything. And it's not that I think most didn't know themselves. So the book of creation. 1, the divine force established its rule, might, eternity, and unity through the 32 secret paths of the descending upper light and concealed itself in 3 categories: the book, the storyteller, and the story. Okay. So we're in a lecture here. So, Lauren, put it in the chat room. Define for me your perception of what this divine force is. Because the choice of words, force, any way you define that, it doesn't paint a pretty picture. So it came in, this divine, it established its rule, its might, eternity. Then that implies that there was a time and an epoch where there was no such thing as eternity. Eternity is a trap. If you truly believe in eternity, stop. It's a trap. Even my Bible studies, Peter, I believe it's in 2 Peter, he writes extensively some really far out shit, man. But he talks about that the eternity of eternities will be wrapped up in a scroll and burned away. So eternity. And then it goes on to say, and unity. So unity is either contagious in a spontaneous situation like at a rock concert, a congregation. But unity can also be enforced. And then they got 32 secret paths of the descending upper light and concealed itself in 3 categories. Now, this is some algebra that we need freaking whiteboards to figure this thing out. So we have no way of defining the 32 secret paths. Now, there's a lot who say, well, we know this path, we can teach you that path. But in this case, there's 32, and you got this whole thing with light now. And this is not the light that I think that we take from our sun. This is a different type of light, and then it conceals itself. Point 2, 10 zaphirots of concealment of the divine force manifest in 22 principal properties. 3 root forces, 7 doubles, and 12 simple ones. Gilbert, would you like to come before the class and dissect this out for us? It's like, hell no. It's like, okay, so all right, so I got the 32 secret paths, and then I got this whole thing with lie, and then I got that the three what? The books, the storyteller, and the story. And now you got me into this concealment of this divine force, which manifests in 22 principal properties. Well, we're going to need to figure out what those 22 principles are, wouldn't you think? 3 root forces, 7 doubles, and 12 simple ones. I feel like I'm at a craps table. All right, I want give me the odds on the double boxcars there. 7 doubles and 12 simple ones. Now I got no idea who or what the 12 simple ones are, but they're with the 7 doubles. And they got a 3 root force. Okay. The 10 Zephirot of concealment correspond to the 10 fingers. 5 against 5. They act in unison as a union between them acts through the power word of revelation and the power word of concealment. Lots of visibility hanging around here. The 10 Zephirot of concealment, 10 are not 9, 10 and not 11. Comprehend this by attaining the higher wisdom and be wise with understanding. Analyze and probe them. Synthesize and summarize them. Return to the disassembled parts of their place in the divinity. This is some serious stuff. I don't care what anyone says. I love it. I mean, and we went through it. And boy, I can remember back then, people were like, well, number one, they like myself, had never really studied such a book. And you're going, this ain't the Jesus God I was taught about. 5, the 10 Zephirot of concealment, they have no beginning and no end. Their good and evil are boundless. Their exaltedness and lowness are infinite. But one divine force eternally governs all of these properties from above. Now, isn't it interesting that we have established that now there is this above and then there's this below? Their good and evil are boundless. It's like in the book of Enoch, we found out that this God doesn't pay any attention to what these Nephilim, that died, and apparently their death is not the way that this God had planned death. And then you got to ask yourself, well, why did this God have death to begin with? I mean, if you're only creating life, right? Why would you have death? I get the whole cycle thing, but come on. Tell me that, this thing that's in above. I mean, and then I'm thinking, is he just sitting at this freaking, integrated computer system, that's monitoring everything? Says it's got eyes everywhere. Even one of its 4 beasts, the 4, things that stand around the throne, as they open their arms and their wings come out, their wings are filled with eyes, representing they're everywhere. 6, the 10 Zephirot of concealment. Their vision is like lightning. No tongue can describe them completely, but one should discuss them again and again. Research the divine force through them by the pure analysis of your speech. Everyone, the homework assignment tonight is to give me a 25-page essay on on your research of the divine force. Number 7, they veil and sparkle. Their end is embedded in their beginning, and their beginning in their end. Well, this sounds like the book of Ecclesiastes to me. Like a flame and a burning coal. Their master, capital M, is one divine force, and there is no other. One can only define it through its actions. Well, the observer of me would say that, okay, if I'm going to have to, I love Gantt charting. Visio was a program. I loved it. It was one of the best freaking planning tools that I'd seen. I know they moved on, but anyway. So it says that I can only define it through its actions, which means that there would then be the opportunity for me to be an observer to that which is unfolding before me, which is apparently this divine force. And I've gotten all these riddles that once I figure the riddle out, I will then, in fact, have an understanding of this, in fact, this divine force. All right. 8, the 10 Zephirot of concealment, brittle your mouth from speaking and your heart from thinking. Well, we're all screwed on that one. I mean, how do you do that? I understand you can get in a meditative state. Got that. But and then immediately what comes to my mind is in the book of Proverbs, because, I wrote that thing out. I mean, I told you all word for word on it. But, the characteristics of a fool, and in one of those characteristics, and there's like 130 plus characteristics of a fool, and like less than 20 characteristics of a wise person. And in there, the fool is told, even a fool seems wise who keeps his mouth shut before the king. So stop talking, stop thinking. If your lips long to utter words, and if your heart yearns to think, come to your senses, for the divine force is unattainable. Well, there's a huge clue right there. I mean, they just gave us one key to get into a huge door. Don't talk, don't think. Boy, there's a discipline exercise for you as well. I want you to spend, like Jenny was talking, 17 seconds of not thinking, not speaking. And the difficulty is that once you start that, now you're going to begin to think about, well, when's the 17 seconds end? 9, the 10 Zephirot of concealment, they conceal the divinity that rules over the lives of the low ones by force, light, wisdom, and law. Wow, I've seen them going over. Wow, I'm going to go over for a couple. But it didn't even get to cover. We'll pick this up on Wednesday because the ladies are with tomorrow. But this one is cool. So they conceal the divinity. They, again, speaking of a group of something or someone's, and this divinity rules over the lives of the low ones by force. That's subjugation. Light, wisdom, and law. Now, maybe it's just me, but when I see this and I go, all right, so you start off by force. That ain't exactly what I would call very friendly. And then when you're adding this force, you're adding light. I don't know if this is a light that's harming. I don't know if this is a light of illumination. Because the next thing you're saying, wisdom, right? And you sum it up by the law. Now, maybe it's just me. My interpretation of that is I don't think we're free as we think we are. Now, this is the mindset, remember, of thousands and thousands of years ago, supposedly. Finally, the two forces come from one and form 22 basic properties, 3 root properties, 7 doubles, and 12 simples. They are all filled with the same light. On Wednesday, we'll probably get into the next part of these two forces. And then in continuing with the theme, we're going to be covering, this whole thing from another perspective of looking at these events and realizing now we're talking pole flips. And if humans were alive, which apparently we were, or some form of us, we went through something that I have no doubt scarred us. So traumatic was the experience. Anyway, we will continue. Da, 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 da. Fascinating, isn't it? And I mean, that's just one belief system of many others. Yeah. But it helps add to the storyline. I like it. It's like, okay. So I like this. Sounds like some Brigham Young. Yeah. Have you ever been to Salt Lake City? I have. The guy Brandon who bought the Skinwalker Ranch, back in the day when I was on the investment circuit, yeah, went to an investment event in Salt Lake City, and anyway, the building that we were in, it was right across the street, and so I did take a venture over there. Interesting town, very interesting. All right, so well, thank you, Stephanie Marie. It is interesting, isn't it? It just you just add it to your own experience and what you've been taught, and when you look at it from these writings, wow. I mean, it's just it's fascinating, and you start breaking this down. So if these events happened, and let's say that they were, that they have a foundation of truth within them. They say they have found the remnants of the Tower of Babel. I don't know. But if they have, then you have to ask yourself, so what happened? This had to be extraterrestrial. There's just no other way of putting it. They did something to us, and it tells me I got this feeling like we all have this collar on us, and it's on our soul as well. We're just trying to figure out how to get the fucking thing off. All right, boy, I really went over. So, hey, Susie Q. All right, everybody. Happy birthday, Bonnie. Didn't know it was your birthday, darling. Happy birthday to you. So, yeah, this is interesting stuff, man. I mean, and particularly as I read it, I always try to put myself, so what would a person 3,500 years ago? I mean, to be candid with you, I'd have nothing in common with them. They would look at me like, I was something from the 8th, 9th level of hell. I don't know, or, something that they would probably find very much offensive. Probably want to kill you over it. I mean, yeah. But yet they wrote this stuff, and they apparently had this stuff figured out, right? I mean, I have had experiences reading on Babylonian magic because I had an association with Daniel, right? and the three witnesses that were in the fire. And if you study the story, what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, he became a jackass. He lived like one for years. The king of Babylon, ate grass, the whole bit. And there was some weird shit going on there. It had to be extraterrestrial, I'm telling you. And this is where all of this stems from. I mean, it's yeah. I often think that if we all had a chance to go, would we really want to go? I mean, seriously, everyone, I don't know. It's like, for myself, I'd probably get a look at this going, no, hell no, no, we're going to stick out like, a serious problem. Yeah.
7 years of research, I've never seen anything like this before. This is a motor that cells use to move around. You have trillions of them in you right now. That is the top of a column in a Hindu temple. The level of detail and craftsmanship is one thing, but there's a level of geometric and engineering knowledge that is closer to what we see in aircraft manufacturing. That turbine and the biomotor both do the same thing so that an airplane and bacteria can move. If this isn't depicting the same thing, you're gonna have to explain to me where the design inspiration came from that coupler and the little stator guy right here. No way they could see these things. These things are complex molecular parts that are assembled and held together by electrons and run on electricity so bacteria can move. This little guy is what gets me though. He's like a little clutch that engages the molecules so it can spin. That's not what that is. Run it back. In the little animation, you know what you see when you look straight up into that motor? You see this thing right here. If you look straight up in one of these temples, guess what you see? There's a pile of coincidences and then there's a pile of explanations, and this pile is getting quite large. Last one, they may look the same, but the biomotor runs on electrical frequency, which I would have labeled with a snake if I was writing a manual for this thing.
Feeling that all over the world people have become dissatisfied with the sterile, dry, and frankly meaningless answers to the great mysteries of life that are given by science and by history. More and more people, and I would say it runs into tens and perhaps even hundreds of millions around the world, are increasingly aware that we're a much more mysterious species than we give ourselves credit for, and that there are many more mysteries and secrets in our past than we are prepared to accept at the moment. And this intuitive sense that people have is driving them to re-examine the past of the human race. Whether or not the historians and the scientists want to do it, the people themselves are leading the way in this quest for the truth about our own past. What's happening here is that intelligent people, ordinary members of the general public, who should never be underestimated, are themselves completely dissatisfied with the picture of the past that is being given to them. More and more evidence is coming out, and very gradually, very slowly, but very surely, this evidence is beginning to overwhelm the old historical model that we've been living with. Now, it's natural enough that those who have a vested interest in the existing historical model, for example, historians, Egyptologists, archaeologists, are going to be extremely reluctant to let it go, because they're blowing away their own careers when they do that. And this is why the move in this direction is coming from the general public, who are seeing the new evidence, who are putting two and two together and realizing that the answers are not provided by orthodox history, and who are actively seeking for an answer to the whole problem. I would say that it's most important of all to question authority. Actually, it's very clear. If we look at the history of science, even within recorded history, we can see that the great advances in science have always been made against a background of enormous resistance from the quote-unquote establishment. If we just blindly accept what the so-called authorities tell us, then we'll never make any kind of progress in ideas. It's essential to keep an open mind to all possibilities and not to be bound down by theories and ideas put forward by an entrenched establishment who have a vested interest in those very theories and ideas. I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods because I wasn't satisfied with the answers that were being given to me to a huge series of mysteries around this planet. Most mysterious of all, a series of ancient sites that have never been properly explained by historians. These sites I think of literally as the fingerprints of the gods, as marks left on our planet by a lost civilization that we have not yet properly identified. And amongst those sites, two in particular are extremely interesting. One is Giza in Egypt, where the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx stand. And on the other side of the Atlantic, on the other side of the world, is Tiwanaku in the high Andes in Bolivia. Possibly the oldest city ever been built, the oldest city surviving to this day. Archaeologists tell us that Tiwanaku dates to just 500 AD. On what is this theory based? It's based on the carbon dating of organic artifacts found buried around the gigantic stones out of which Tiwanaku is built. That's like saying that we can date Westminster Cathedral in London, which was built hundreds of years ago, on the basis of somebody buried in it 10 years ago. It's completely illogical. Tiwanaku is an extraordinary site. It's built of gigantic blocks of stone, which in some cases weigh more than 400 tons each. It's astronomically aligned with enormous precision. And when we do the astronomical calculations on Tiwanaku, we find that what those alignments are telling us is that this city was laid out 15,000 years ago, at least 15,000 years ago. And that also ties in with the geology of the site, because it's very clear, and even Orthodox archaeologists don't dispute this, that Tiwanaku was built as a port on the shores of Lake Titicaca. Now, Lake Titicaca today is almost 15 miles away from Tiwanaku and more than 100 feet lower. Of course, different lakes lose their water level at different rates, but I've talked to experts from the British Geological Survey who are working in that area at the moment. And they tell me that for Lake Titicaca to have declined as much as it has from the edge of the city of Tiwanaku would have taken, at the very least, 10,000 years to happen. So it seems sometimes that the geologists and the archaeologists don't compare notes on these problems, and perhaps if they did, we'd begin to get a better idea of what really went on in our own past. Situated at an altitude of 12,500 feet above sea level, Tiwanaku in the high Andes in Bolivia is one of the strangest and most mysterious sites in the world. A site that may have been very wrongly dated by conventional archaeologists working in that area. Round about the turn of the century, a great Bolivian scholar called Arthur Poznański, a professor at La Paz University, began a 50-year study of the ruins of Tiwanaku. Year in, year out, no matter what the conditions, no matter what the weather, Poznański was up there, excavating, measuring, carefully calculating the alignments of the site. And as a result of that 50 years of work, he came up with an extraordinary conclusion. He concluded on the basis of astronomical alignments that Tiwanaku had been laid out more than 15,000 years ago, long before any civilization known to history is ever supposed to have existed. When the Spanish first arrived in South America, they asked the local people, the Incas at that time, who built this incredible city of Tiwanaku with these gigantic blocks of stone? Did you build it? The Incas said no. In fact, they laughed at the idea. They said we had nothing to do with this. This was built thousands of years before our time. It was built, they said, by gods or demigods who they called the Viracochas, bearded, pale-skinned men who came from across the seas, they said, in a time of darkness and turmoil, when civilization had been destroyed, to restore the health of society, to bring back culture to a devastated land. And all the legends and traditions state that it was these mysterious bearded strangers long ages ago who built the city of Tiwanaku. The best bet is that the powerful statue, the middle of the three pillars in the subterranean temple in Tiwanaku, is an image of this bearded civilizing hero, Viracocha. Certainly the beard is very evident on the face, and the features of the face in no way resemble the features of a native of that area. He looks like a foreigner, and in fact, so much was he remembered to have looked like a foreigner that when the Spanish first arrived in South America, bearded, pale-skinned, coming from across the sea by boat, exactly as Viracocha was said to have come in all the legends, the local people at first welcomed the Spaniards, believing that they were the gods returning. But unlike the Viracochas, who brought only good things with them and who tried to create civilization and a prosperous and worthwhile society, the bearded Spaniards who came to South America destroyed everything that they found in their way. They obliterated almost all traces of the ancient civilizations that had lived in that area. They wiped clean one of the memory banks of mankind.
Is the upper statue also Viracocha?
It's been speculated that the statue on the side of the Gateway of the Sun also represents Viracocha. All of this is speculation because we have no records coming down to us from this period. But it is a great mystery to find on these extraordinarily ancient monuments the images of a type of people who should not have been present, according to conventional history, in the Americas at that time.
Well, who was Viracocha and where did he come from?
My own view is that Viracocha was one of the survivors of a great lost civilization of high antiquity that was destroyed in an enormous global cataclysm. I think there were a number of survivors, and all around the world we find memories of people like him, tall, bearded people. Quetzalcoatl in Mexico is another example. Osiris in Egypt is another example. I've made a very close study of the symbolism of all of these figures, and they have a remarkable amount in common, much more than can be explained by coincidence. I think what we're looking at here are very ancient memories of a people from a civilization as yet unidentified by history, who sought to keep the light of knowledge burning in a devastated world. It's long been noticed that there are curious similarities between the very ancient historical cultures of Mexico, of the Andes, and of Egypt, and other places around the world as well, quite distant and scattered places. And it's been suggested from time to time that maybe these have resulted from some kind of direct influence of Egypt on Mexico, or of South America on Egypt, or so on and so forth. My own view is that what we're looking at here is a common influence that touched all of these places long before recorded history began. A remote third-party civilization unidentified by historians that had a presence in Mexico, that had a presence in South America, that had a presence in Egypt and elsewhere, and that left behind a legacy of knowledge in all of those places. That legacy was then reinterpreted and developed and used in different ways by the different peoples, but still, even to this day, we find those common elements, and I think they all go back to a common source. There are so many strange similarities linking ancient Egypt, ancient South America, ancient Central America as well. One of the best examples is the kind of stonework that was used, very large blocks of stone put together with extraordinary complexity in very finely built walls with joints so precisely aligned that you can't even slip a piece of paper into those joints today. This architecture looks very similar in the different parts of the world, and yet there's supposed to have been no contact between these ancient civilizations. It seems to me that the answer to this problem lies in an even more ancient civilization, which passed down a legacy of architectural knowledge to all these widely scattered areas of the globe. And it's that common legacy that explains the common points and similarities better than any other theory that I've come across. What I think of as one of the architectural fingerprints of the gods is a certain way of working with stone. For example, carrying blocks around a corner in an L shape is a very extraordinary way of building, and we find this, for example, in the Vali Temple next door to the Sphinx at Giza, and we find it in pre-Inca architecture all over the Andes in South America. To me, the best explanation for this common method of building, and very unusual method of building on both sides of the Atlantic, is that it's the result of a common architectural legacy handed on to both of these areas by a remote civilization not yet identified by history. And what I see in that architecture is the architecture of cataclysm. This seems to have been an architecture that was designed to withstand the most horrendous geological shocks, huge earthquakes, disasters of that kind. This type of architecture is capable of riding out the worst earthquake that you can imagine. So it seems to have been devised by a people who needed to deal with very bad earthquakes. And we find that architecture in Egypt and in South America still surviving to this day. It's pretty clear to me from the evidence that a common legacy of architectural knowledge was passed down from remote prehistory and spread out in very widely scattered locations around the world. And what all this architecture has in common is enormous stability. I think of it as the architecture of cataclysm, architecture that was created by a people who had passed through an enormous disaster and who had survived that disaster, a great movement of the earth, as all the legends say, who wanted to build monuments that could never be destroyed by no matter how great the earthquake was. And also a people who had a fixation with predicting when such a cataclysm might occur again, and who seemed to have looked to the skies and to the stars to find a way of calculating when the next disaster would occur. Ask yourself this: if you belonged to a high civilization that had just been almost completely obliterated by a gigantic geological cataclysm, a movement of the crust of the earth, what would you set out to do in the future? First of all, you would set out to create buildings that were extremely stable, that would survive the worst imaginable earthquake. And that's what we find in these fingerprints of a lost architectural knowledge all around the world. A fixation, a desire to create buildings that would last forever, no matter what happened to them. And another thing that we find is a focus on trying to predict when the cataclysm will recur. What has come down to us from the ancient past seems to be a message that by a close study of astronomical phenomena, it is possible to predict when the Earth will again be visited by this all-destroying cataclysm. And the eeriest thing of all is that there's a convergence of ancient mythology from all around the world. The best known example is the Mayan calendar from Central America, which tells us very precisely that there's going to be another great movement of the Earth on the 23rd of December in 2012 AD in our calendar. All of this based on very careful astronomical observations. Now, I'm not saying that the ancient myths are right. What I am saying is that we would be stupid if we didn't at least listen to this testimony that has been passed down to us from a remote time, and a testimony that bears the fingerprints of scientific thinkers, not primitive savages. The prime meridian at Greenwich is measured with the latest modern techniques, and beside the meridian line there stands a meridian building, which is oriented north, south, east, and west. The interesting thing about this building, although it incorporates all the latest knowledge, is that it is in fact 9/60ths of a degree off true north. And that's about the best we can do with our culture. But if you go to Egypt and go to the Great Pyramid, which is not just any little building, which is a 6 million ton building, and which is at the very least 4,500 years old, and perhaps much older, you find that it is just 3/60ths of a degree off true north. Now, what this tells us is that the people who built the Great Pyramid were people with advanced scientific knowledge, with the ability to express that knowledge with incredible precision in the most remarkable monument that has ever been built on the face of this earth. We're told by Egyptologists that that monument, perfectly oriented due north, south, east and west, was built simply to satisfy the ego of some pharaoh of the 4th dynasty as his tomb. Everything about the monument proclaims the opposite conclusion, that it could never have been a tomb, and that whatever its purpose and function is, it was not to satisfy the ego of an individual pharaoh, whose name is not even inscribed upon it in any place. This is a work of science and intelligence left for future generations to puzzle out. Not only is it perfectly oriented to the north, it also stands on latitude 30, exactly 1/3 of the way between the North Pole and the equator. Again, the Egyptologists would like us to believe that this is the result of coincidence. I think this defies common sense, and more people are unwilling to accept such an idea about the Great Pyramid. If it stands on latitude 30, then it does so because its builders deliberately put it there. For several hundred years, a model of what mankind is and of what the earth is has been steadily building up, I would say since the Renaissance and perhaps even before. And this is the prevailing model that we live with today. Academic specialists, whether they're scientists, physicists, geologists, Egyptologists working in the realm of history, archaeologists, all have a vested intellectual interest in the existing model because that is what their careers are based on. They've grown up with that model. They took it in with their mother's milk. They themselves teach it in universities to other students. For such people, human nature being what it is, it's very easy to understand why they find it extremely difficult to deal with evidence which contradicts that model, in which they have such a strong personal investment. And it's natural that they should seek to ignore or discount or even ridicule that evidence. But we're getting to a situation now where the evidence is piling up and piling up and piling up, and the old model is becoming increasingly untenable. The great challenge for the future is for people to open their minds again to all possibilities and not to desperately defend a view of the past that just doesn't work anymore. But I'm afraid the last people who are going to be prepared to open their minds to that possibility are the scientists and the historians who are tied in to the existing model. What I sense, particularly with Egyptologists, is a kind of desperation or fear. They themselves can't be completely blind to the new evidence that's coming up that contradicts the model that they've been working with. But they realize that if they admit even one tiny point of that new evidence, that's going to be the thin end of the wedge, which is going to overturn the whole model on which their careers are based, and also their whole idea of what the past of mankind is. It's extremely difficult psychologically for anybody to accept such a revolutionary overturn of everything that they hold to be true, and it's natural that they should resist as strongly as possible the new ideas that are coming up. But these aren't just ideas. This is evidence from all over the world which casts doubt on the old model. And that's why people are increasingly turning away from the orthodox authorities and reading books like Fingerprints of the Gods to find answers to the mysteries that puzzle them as well. The model of the old world and the New World is deeply rooted in the conventional historical view that America was discovered in 1492 by people from Europe, and that's when its history begins, although of course we know that the Americas were inhabited for long, long periods before that. But what nobody has ever considered is the possibility that there may have been an earlier world altogether, a civilization on this planet way before what we call history began, in that deep, dark period called prehistory, from which no records have come down. A civilization that knew the world as well as we do ourselves, and which did not divide it into categories of old and new, but that left its traces everywhere for us to rediscover today. I am convinced by the evidence that we are a species with amnesia. We have forgotten something of great importance from our own past. And I think in that terrible forgetfulness, we may find the explanation for why we're so confused, so disturbed, so mixed up, so lacking in direction as we face the coming millennium. There's a real sense of disorientation spreading around the world. And I think the only way that we're going to overcome that is to recover this incredibly important episode from our own past that we've kind of blanked out and forgotten. When we recover it, we'll realize for a start that our civilization isn't the apex of creation. It isn't the pinnacle towards which everything has been building throughout all of geological time. Rather, it's part of an up and down, a flow in history that goes on of civilizations, that it's possible for a civilization to reach a very high level of advancement and be wiped out. This is something we've never really confronted, and we need to confront it, that a great civilization of the past was so completely destroyed that almost no traces of it are left. The same thing could happen to us. This knowledge should teach us humility. I think what has happened, and it's a process that's taken hundreds of years to come to fruition, is a growing dissatisfaction with all the old answers that have been given to us. Conventional religion no longer works. It doesn't provide us with the explanations we need to make sense of what we see going on around us. Science doesn't give us any meaning in our lives at all. It wants to reduce everything to accidental collections of molecules. There's a profound dissatisfaction with that, and a strong feeling that there must be something more, and people are searching for this. History doesn't give us the answer either. It envisages a straightforward, linear evolution of society from primitive to advanced today. And yet, all of us grew up in our childhood hearing the myths and legends of the Golden Age, and we have a sense that there may be truth in those myths and legends, a truth that history just hasn't come to terms with at all.
There is a saying attributed to Elvis Presley that goes, "The truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it ain't going anywhere." So I want you to pay attention to these three different quotes that I'm going to mention here. When people lack a sense of awe, there will be disaster. Do not intrude into their homes. Do not harass them at work. If you do not interfere, they will not weary of you. Therefore, the wise know themselves, but make no show, have self-respect, but are not arrogant. They let go of that and choose this. When people no longer fear force, they bring about greater force. Do not limit their place. Do not reject their livelihood, because the ruler does not reject them. Therefore, they do not reject the ruler. Therefore, the sages know themselves, but do not glorify themselves. Respect themselves, but do not praise themselves. Thus, they discard that and take this. And again, the Elvis Presley quote, "The truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it ain't going anywhere." And then we have, and then there's this other one. To give light, you must burn. The thoughtless man, even if he can recite a large portion of the law, but is not a doer of it, has no share in the priesthood, but is like a cowherder counting the cows of others. That is a classic quote from like the Dharmapada. The best way to control people is to terrorize and traumatize them. If you deny the existence of the thinking, inquisitive man, then you are not inclusive. The book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 3, says that those who manifest wisdom will shine like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who turn many to righteousness will shine like the stars, forever and ever. The Dharmapada says that when those who are foolish become wise, they give light to the world like a moon breaking through the clouds. When their good deeds overcome the bad, they give light to the world like the moon breaking free from behind the clouds. In short, there is an old saying that goes, there are three things that can't remain long hidden forever, and that they are the sun, the moon, and the truth. Three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. No matter how many attempts to censor others, eventually that will start happening to you, and even that is temporary. What has been hidden in the dark shall be brought into the light. All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is vehemently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. After all great truths began as heresy and blasphemy. Respect for the truth comes close to being the basis of all morality. After all, as Ron Paul said, that the truth is treason in the empire of lies. That is why one should do well not to build upon falsehoods and outright lies. You see, wisdom is the ability to see beyond belief structures and see the golden thread woven through them. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. There is a difference between wisdom and authoritarianism. After all, heresy and blasphemy are the great perpetuators of freedom of speech and artistic expression. yet being strategic and thoughtful in your use of them. Freedom has no limit but the yoke which directs our action. Not the bridle of an oxen, but the yoke of a racehorse, being held back by their rider only when pacing is needed or to keep the horse safe. See, this is not understood by people. You have people who say that, oh, we should censor people because we don't like the information that they're putting out. It contradicts our worldview, and therefore freedom of speech is bad because it allows a lot of bad faith actors. Well, you get bad faith actors if you censor or outright ban free speech and artistic expression. So, it doesn't really matter. History will tell you time and time again that these people who say things like this particular post on social media, people who say things like this often are not people that I would trust anyway, because they wish to control the narrative, mainly because they don't like the narrative that's being presented by other people. And that is just really hilarious about these types of people. They believe in free speech, but very selectively. And people like Graham Hancock have had to put up with these assholes for much of his career in this sort of arena. People like Graham Hancock who have written their books, like Underworld, for instance. I would actually put Fingerprints of the Gods in here, because that's one of his more famous books, or his Magicians of the Gods, which I haven't even read Magicians of the Gods. I did read Fingerprints of the Gods. That was like my introduction into his material, and this is a book that I have yet to read, but I have it. And it's just kind of an interesting, just really interesting how a lot of the sort of history, people like him and people like Robert Duvall, who wrote the Orion Mystery, have had to put up with crap from like the likes of Zahi Hawass. And then we have, and then we have also, and you have like the late John Anthony West, who bore a lot of scrutiny, like major scrutiny from like Egyptologists, like Mark Lehner. Yeah, although I believe Mark Lehner, I believe Dr. Robert Schoch was the geologist at Boston University, got most of the brunt of that criticism, but still, people like those four men have had to put up with like crap. And even in the civilization, in those more established civilizations that we have the archaeological stuff, there's so much there that we don't know. And a lot of people were probably unwilling to really know more than what's there. It's like we've got these civilizations from decades ago that are great, that we're still learning about. So it's like, I mean, what else do we not know? Do we not know? With the history that we've been told, we have Göbekli Tepe. Yeah, and that's like one of the great mysteries, and that's like one of the great mysteries that we still are just learning more and more about as we dig into this stuff. Like, how did they move a lot of the stuff that they did? Like, how did they build a lot of these things? Like, there's so much speculation on this that you honestly don't know what to think or what to say in relations to it. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time, peace out, everyone.